Hello everyone! In this week's video, I'll be creating illustrations with markers. The lovely people over at Arrtx have sent me some of their new paint markers to try out. I tested out their other paint markers in this video, but I mostly just used them for details in my painting. This time around, I wanted to let the markers shine and see what they can do on their own. I also thought it'd be fun to make illustrations with different amounts of markers. Like the first one will use 1 marker, the second one will use 3 markers, and the third one will use all the markers. Or, well, most of them anyways. We'll talk more about it when we get there. First, let's test out the Simptap markers to see what they are like. So we have this box. It has a band around it to help it stay closed. And inside we have 24 different colors. Each marker has a code printed on top of it, which I really like. It helps me keep track of the markers when I'm making swatch charts. And this is what the marker barrel looks like. On the side we have a little window that allows you to see the ink inside. I always like when marker barrels include this. It allows us to see the paint consistency and how much of it is left. I really like being able to see inside the barrel. Like the previous markers I tested from Arrtx, these ones also have a brush tip, but they are different. The last ones I tested didn't have a ball inside to shake up the paint, and these ones do. Also, for these ones, they have a button on the back that when you press it down, it lets the paint flow into the nib. Now, this should be a simple concept, but I was a bit confused on how to do this at first. At first, I wasn't sure if I just needed to press the button once, or hold it down, or press it up and down. And eventually I figured out that I need to hold the button down, and for some of the colors, I'd have to hold it down for a good amount of time. I would say around 20 to 30 seconds until the nib would be fully filled, while other ones only took a few seconds. I'm not totally sure what was causing this variable in time. I shook each marker for about the same amount of time, so I don't think that's what caused the difference. But I do have to say, after prepping all of the markers, my hand kinda hurt, since pressing down the button does take a decent amount of force, and you have to hold it down. However, after some time, I had all the markers prepped. Oh, another supplies Arrtx sent me were the gel impact pens in silver and gold. They have a very shiny ink and it's very opaque. I tried them on black paper and they worked super well. Anyways, now that we have prepped the supplies, let's start making some art. So for this first picture, I'm only going to use 1 marker color. When I saw this color J467, I thought of Hatsune Miku. And back when I was doing the color wheel challenge, many of you were kind of upset that I didn't pick Miku for the color cyan. So this picture is for those of you who really wanted me to draw Miku. I decided to keep this illustration more simple. I'm drawing her in a 3/4 view and we are mostly going to focus on the face and upper torso. Since I am going to be using the color and the color is for her hair, I tried to showcase a lot of the hair by having her pigtails come forward. I am drawing the sketch digitally, but my plan is to print out my sketch and use my light pad to transfer my sketch to the paper I want to use. However, remember how in this video I couldn't use my light pad because it didn't have the power cord? Well, I thought I'd be able to find the power cord at my parents' house, but it turns out that it's lost and I couldn't find it. So I had to do what I did last time. I took some washi tape and taped the paper to my tablet screen. I also set my display to max brightness to make it more effective. Also, this worked better than last time because I darkened and thickened my sketch a bit before tracing. That way the sketch would show up better. And this was actually kind of nice since I didn't have to print out the sketch. And once my sketch was transferred, we can now start coloring. Now I know I said I'm only using 1 color, and this is true, but to help the piece turn out a bit better, I'm also giving myself access to black and white. They are technically shades, not colors. This goes for the markers and the color pencils. The color pencils will be used to help me clean and tighten things up. Oh, and I have 2 teal ones because I wasn't sure which one I wanted to use. I ended up using this one. Anyways, I had an odd idea I wanted to try out for this. I was wondering if I could make these markers function like watercolors at all. My idea was that if I colored with the marker a bit on a palette and then added some water, that I could make a faux watercolor. And this actually worked decently well. Now, obviously, it's not going to behave like high-quality watercolors, but it gets the job done. I want to add a light wash of teal to the hair, that way when I leave some blank space for the highlights, when I am going in with the markers, there is some color underneath that can shine through. It was a bit of a balance using the color in this way because I wanted to add enough water to the color to make it easy to spread around, but if I added too much, it became really washed out. I probably could have made this wash darker, but it's okay. I fix this later as the process goes on. Once I filled in the hair and let it dry, I watered down the black marker to make a light gray for the vest. The black was very pigmented, so I had to water it down a good amount to get it to be light enough. Also, I added a bit of teal to the black to make it cooler in tone. It was a bit on the warm side when I was watering it down, and the teal really helped cool it out. I also filled in her hair square things with the gray. They are usually black, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to fill them in with straight black, since I thought that might make them draw too much attention. Now for the scary part, going in with the marker. I decided to start in an area that I knew would be dark and wouldn't have much for highlights. I kind of started with leaving a blank area for the highlight, but I decided to put paint over it since I wasn't totally sure if a highlight would go there. I moved over to the right pigtail and also started with where I think the area would be the darkest. I was a bit nervous to move into the highlighted areas because I wasn't totally sure how I would handle it, but I couldn't just keep avoiding them, so I jumped in. I broke up the strand into sections and moved the marker in a flicking motion to help me get thinner tapering lines. Then to sort of help the highlights blend into the rest of the hair, I put some more marker on my paint palette, watered it down, and applied this watered down version to the paper. I was liking the direction this was going in, so I continued to do the rest of the highlights in this way. Now, something interesting about this technique is that it worked better and better the drier my marker got. As I used more paint, the brush nib got drier and drier, and this made it easier to get thinner hair-like lines with the flicking motion. The brush kind of naturally started making the right texture because of the lack of paint. And this is something I enjoyed about these markers. I can kind of control how much paint I want there to be in the nib. If I want more paint, I simply hold down the button and more paint will enter the nib. But if I want the nib to be drier, I just try to use up the paint that's in the nib. With the other Arrtx paint pens, they didn't have a way to add more ink to the nib, and this would result in them getting dry sometimes. I found the way to fix this was to store the markers upside down so that the paint could flow to the nib when they are being stored. But with these ones I can just add more paint, so I quite like that. But it is really nice how the other ones don't have any prep work, and that's really convenient. I did get a bit scared when I was coloring the second pigtail. My marker was getting a bit too dry, and it was becoming hard to color with. So I let more paint flow into the nib by holding down the button. And well, now my nib was full of paint and I was having a hard time achieving the same texture that I was before. The paint wasn't feathering out as nicely since there was more of it. I tried to use up this extra paint, and I think I even applied the nib to a paper towel to help soak up the extra paint a little bit. That way I could get the same texture like in the other areas. Before moving on to the bangs, I decided to darken up some of my sketch using the teal color pencil. I wanted to be able to easily separate the bangs from the rest of the hair. And while I was at it, I also decided to darken the areas like around the face. The coloring process for the bangs was basically the same thing that I've been showing you for the rest of the hair. So let's move on to the eyes. For the eyes, I filled them in with a very lightly watered down paint and then proceeded to use color pencils to flesh out the details and add contrast. A lot of times I don't recommend adding shading with black, but it was kind of my only option in this case, so I will add black to the top of the irises to darken them. Also, in case you don't know, Hatsune Miku is a mascot for the Vocaloid software. Vocaloid is a voice bank software that lets users create music using pre-recorded voice audio. So Miku is kind of like a virtual pop star. I don't know if Vocaloid is super popular nowadays. It might be. I know Miku is still pretty well known. There was even that collab this year with Miku and Pokemon. That was super cool. I loved seeing all the different designs. They were so neat. I still occasionally listen to Vocaloid music while I work, although I do tend to listen to a lot of the older songs, and I don't know much for newer music. If you know of any artists that have newer music, you can let me know down in the comments. It would be nice to find some newer favorites. And here's the finished picture of Miku. I was actually the most nervous for this piece because I knew it'd be a challenge, but I'm actually really happy with how it turned out. I'm really happy with how the hair and highlights ended up looking. So this next drawing is going to be kind of random. I saw these three colors and I was like, it's like Jack's colors from the Amazing Digital Circus. And he sounded fun to draw, so I decided to go with it. I kept seeing random stuff in advertising related to the Amazing Digital Circus, but I didn't watch it at first because it looked kind of weird. And I wasn't sure if it was one of those indie animations that has more adult content, if that makes any sense. I mean, I'm an adult, but I tend to not watch more adult content. However, I then saw an artist YouTuber that I follow make fan art for it in a video, and their audience seems to be mostly kids. So I was like, maybe it's actually not too bad. And the character designs always intrigued me, so I checked it out. We will continue this topic in a moment. For now, let's talk about the art. For the art this time, I'm allowing 3 colors for both markers and pencils, along with black and white. Now, I was a bit sad when I started coloring with the purple because it was a lot darker than I was anticipating. I actually thought I grabbed the wrong color, but I didn't. It's just that on my swatch chart, when you compare this purple to the others, it seems pretty light. But when it's on its own, it seems much darker, and this doesn't really match Jack's colors. However, I decided to keep going since I knew I could edit the scanned version of this piece if I wanted to. Anyways, back to what we were talking about, I decided to watch the pilot episode for the Amazing Digital Circus, and I would definitely say it's not for all ages. I would say maybe 13 and up, and I know I'm probably going to get comments like, I'm 9 and I watched this. And yeah, everyone has their own personal gates for these kind of things. But that being said, I did kind of like it, especially for the animation quality. The animation really commits to the idea that this is a digital world and that it isn't actually real. I find it funny when things like glitch out or like something clips into something else. Like you can tell it's on purpose, and I really like that attention to detail. Also, the mixture of the very bright fun colors along with things that feel kind of dark is a nice contrast. The characters also move in a very bouncy way, which I really like. But the tone of the show is definitely creepy and kind of dark, but also a bit intriguing. I really like Pomni, she's cute, and I feel bad for her and the fact that she's now stuck in the digital world. You can really feel her dread and that she just wants to go home. I do also like Jax, but he's a bit of a jack-wagon. I find the way his mouth is animated to be very interesting. He basically always has his teeth showing, even when he's fully talking, and it's very unique. So a little bit more about the art. The process for this piece was pretty simple. Even though I am using more colors, it was easier than the first picture. It's easier because this time around I'm going for a very flat, cartoony look, and the shapes that I'm filling in are pretty simple. I do have to say though, it was really fun drawing a more cartoony character of simple colors and shapes. I had a lot of fun, and I feel like it's something I need to try to let myself do more often. I need to let myself break away from the usual human characters and how I draw things, because at this point I feel like maybe I'm getting a little bit burnt out on drawing my usual stuff. So drawing something different was really fun. So yeah, the Amazing Digital Circus was definitely intriguing. I'm not totally sure if I'd watch the show. It would depend on how dark it got, but if another episode came out, I'd probably give it a try. Anyways, here's my drawing of Jax. I am happy with how it turned out, but the colors are kind of off. So for the scanned version, I decided to adjust them a bit, just to make myself happy. I really don't like when colors are super off. And lastly, we have the piece I'll use all the colors. Now, I wanted to be able to use all the colors without it looking like a horrible jumbled mess of colors. I eventually thought of my idea where a character is wearing headphones and there's a bunch of colors coming from the headphones, kind of suggesting the liveliness of the music. For all of the more muted colors, I'll try to use all of those on the character, mostly because I don't want to use these muted colors in the rainbow, but it also gives a contrast of the music being very fun and colorful, and the character maybe feeling more muted and sad. Like with the other pieces, I traced a sketch onto my watercolor paper, and we are now ready to color. To help me keep track of what colors I used, I separated them into 2 piles, one for the rainbow music, and the others for the character. I would then move them to a different spot once I had used them. Oh, so I excluded the silver and gold marker since I didn't really want to add metallic elements to this piece. And I did end up using the white marker, but I forgot to use the black marker at all. But it's okay, it's technically a shade. I'm really using that technicality to my advantage in this video. To start out, I added some color pencil to the face. My hope is that the color pencil will blend into the light color for the skin tone and give it a light blush effect, and add some more color to the face. I can technically add color pencil on top of the paint, but the pencil doesn't lay down very smoothly and tends to have a lot of texture, so I kind of want to avoid doing that if I can. Also, I am using Arrtx color pencils in this video. I really love their color pencils, they're really nice. They've been the main color pencil I've been using lately. I talk about them more in this video, so if you want to check that out, you can. But yeah, highly recommend their color pencils. After laying down the pencils, I go over them with the paint marker, and my hope is that they will dissolve a bit into the paint. And to my surprise, it did work decently well. It is a very subtle effect, but it did its job of adding a bit of liveliness to the face. Next was the hair. I put the darkest brown down for a shadow, and then went over it a bit with my second darkest brown. I preferred the warmness of this brown, so I mostly used this one for the shading and for the hair. I would try to work kind of fast while the paint is wet to make the colors blend a bit between the two browns. It's still kind of a harsh shadow, but there was a little bit of color mixing happening. Also, something interesting I noticed is that the nib on my brown pen had a green area where the nib wasn't fully filled with paint. And I'm assuming this is pigment separation of some kind. I don't think it's mold, since mold isn't usually a bright green and wouldn't grow this fast. And I know sometimes pigments, when they are experiencing separation or being compacted, they can be different colors, but I'm not 100% sure. Oh, and a random thing I thought of while working on this, I feel like I rarely create illustrations of characters in side view, and I'm not totally sure why. I'll use it pretty often in my webcomic, but yeah, when it comes to illustrations, I don't use it very often. I think it's because I like drawing both sides of a character's face and getting to see more of the character. Plus, side view can be a bit wonky for me at times, but I have gotten more consistent with it, I feel like. I get a lot of practice with my webcomic. Next was filling in the clothes. I kind of tried to do the pencil thing again like I did for the skin. However, since the purple was much more pigmented, it didn't work as well. The pencil got pretty much fully covered. For the rest of the clothes, I'm just kind of filling them in a flat color, and that's pretty boring, so let's keep moving. For the part of the hair where the color will be overlapping, I decided to fill it in with a watered down brown. That way the color will be able to overlay on top of it. Speaking of the music color, I started working on that now. To help my colors blend, I laid down a bit of water towards the top. Then I started applying washes of watered down paint marker with my brush. I'm going in rainbow order. I go from red to orange to yellow and so on. This will be a bit different from a standard rainbow since I do decide to add magenta along the bottom. I was getting worried as I moved down the rainbow because I had a lot of colors I needed to fit in and not a ton of room. By the time I got to the green, I had already filled in a good amount, but I still had teal, 2 blues, 2 purples, and a pink to fit in. However, when I applied the blue, it was much stronger than the other colors, and this kind of made me realize how washed the other ones were. So I started to work in reverse and added more colors to make them more vibrant, and also to make the blend a little softer and less splotchy. I then moved back down and added in more of the darker blues and purples. Once again, these felt more powerful, so I ended up doing another pass over the colors again to further blend and brighten them. I wonder if this is what Mariah Elizabeth feels like when she's making blendy rainbows. This process was kind of repetitive, but also fun. Like I said before, these are kind of a faux watercolor. I'm definitely using these markers in a way that they weren't really intended for. And because these aren't actually watercolors, I'm not going to get as bold of colors and the wash isn't going to be as smooth. But I do feel like things turned out pretty well, all things considered. I am a bit sad that I forgot to use the gel impact pens in any of my pieces. Like I said, they worked super well and I highly recommend them. I know I said earlier that I didn't use the metallic markers for this piece because I didn't want areas to be filled in with metallic. But I should have used the pens in the rainbow. That would have looked so cool. If you're looking for silver pens and gold pens, I recommend checking these ones out. They're like super opaque and shiny. Oh, you should totally check out the paint pens, of course. I love that they have a brush nib. It gives me a lot of control over my line weight. I also love that I can control the paint flow with the button. I've never seen paint markers like these ones before, so they're pretty cool. The paint was also really opaque, went down smoothly, dried fast, and they have a nice variety of colors. If you want to check out Simptap markers or impact gel pens, there are links in the description. Also, I noticed something while I was editing. I somehow forgot to use one of the colors. It was J529. I somehow didn't set it out when I was prepping my workspace, and so it didn't get used. So did I fail? I didn't use all the colors. But I can fix things with the power of editing. Anyways, here's the finished picture, and I am really happy with how it turned out and the blendy rainbow. The blendy rainbow turned out a bit better than I was anticipating, so I'm glad. And here's the scanned version. I added the missing color to the strings of his hoodie, so now it has all the colors. When I set out to make a piece using all the colors, I wasn't sure what to expect, but I came up with a concept that I liked and that used the colors in a fun way. And overall, I really liked working on all these pieces, and I really enjoyed getting to experiment with the markers and seeing what they can do, and I hope you enjoyed watching the process. Before we end, I want to thank my super awesome YouTube members and Patreon patrons. Thank you all so much for your support, it means so much to me. And thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next week in my next video. Bye!